Welcome. I'm Sylvia Law. This is the 23rd third time that I've had the honor of welcoming people to the Rose Sheinberg lecture. Rose Sheinberg was an intersectional person before anyone knew that word. She's also the aunt of Richard Sheinberg, and Richard and Jill had the idea of giving something to the law school, but in a form that would honor Rose, but also would assure that the students were involved in picking the lecturer, in organizing the program, and continuing a tradition of bringing people together to address evolving, always challenging issues at the intersection of race, gender, and class. Honestly, I'm so delighted with this audience. I don't think we've ever seen an audience as diverse as this one. And we've had a lot of diverse audiences and great speakers, but I think you guys win the prize on that regard. The committee that organizes this lecture consists primarily of students. Students are selected in their first year, and I'm now open to applications from one else who would like to be on the committee. They serve for the rest of their law school career, and they help select the lecture and organize the program. And also some faculty members, Alina Das, someplace right here in the front, our wonderful immigration law clinician, Naomi Sunshine, someplace. Oh, down at the end, a wonderful lawyering professor. We have had a tradition of having an alum member, and we've revived that this year, Elizabeth Jordan from 2013. Elizabeth, are you here? No. Our graduating 3L members are Claude Heffron and Hugh Barron, who might be out at the table registering people coming late. They've taken us, I think, to a new level of organization. We've never before taken people's emails down, but it's brilliant. It only took us 23 years to figure that out, guys. And the 2L members that will have the heavy lifting next year are Edie Joseph, Tyler Walton, and Kyla Vincent, who've all been wonderful members this year. My job is to introduce Vince Warren, head of the Center for Constitutional Rights. He has a long career as a civil rights and civil liberties lawyer at the ACLU, now at the Center, working for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa. Just this week, the Center's in the news, challenging the surveillance of Black Lives Matter, continuing to struggle to enforce the rights that the Center achieved from the Supreme Court for the Guantanamo detainees, challenging in federal courts the torture of people at Abu Ghraib. The Center is on the front line of every important human rights and civil rights and racial justice and economic justice issue. And we're so fortunate that Vince could take time to come be here with us tonight. We had lunch with Linda earlier today, and we are in for a treat. Vince.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Professor Law. And these days, I like to tell people that the Center for Constitutional Rights is mostly the center for what's left of your constitutional rights. But the good news is that you guys are all here and you're gonna make that stuff happen in your legal careers. My name is Vince Warren. It's my distinct honor to introduce Linda Sarsour, who is our lecturer tonight. Now, there are a great many things to be said about Linda and her outstanding leadership. But since I'm all that is standing between you and hearing her talk, I will be mercifully brief. However, for the sake of maintaining my own self-confidence, I have to be honest with you. In addition to being honored to introduce Linda, I'm a bit relieved. And I'm relieved because I get to speak before her rather than after her. Because when Linda stops speaking, the mic just drops. There's nothing more to be said after she speaks. There's no more intellectual or spiritual or emotional bandwidth left for the listener. There's only inspiration and a desire for action. And you will feel that tonight. And just so that you know that my immense gratitude at having been asked to speak before Linda isn't purely driven by ego, I would like to offer this. Earlier this year, I was asked to keynote a gala at the Michigan Human Rights Coalition in Detroit. And on those planning calls where I was speaking with the folks who were organizing that event, I asked them who the keynote speaker was in the previous year in the hopes that I would be able to build a bit on the previous speaker's talk to be able to move people along. The event host literally said the following words to me: "Bad news for you, Vince. Last year's speaker was Linda Sarsour. I don't think you'll be able to top that, so perhaps you should be thinking about talking about something else." So when I arrived at the event, everyone that was sitting at my table was chatting a full year later about how amazing and inspiring Linda's talk was. Then, as if recognizing me for the first time, that I was in the room, they all turned to me and in a manner that can only really be described as concerned sympathy, and said, "Oh, I'm sure you'll be good too." Well, they were right. There is only one Linda Sarsour in the world, and I realized that one of our great privileges in social justice work is to listen to and learn from a true leader. And when I'm in Linda's presence, I'm well advised to listen more than I talk. So tonight I'm going to introduce Linda to you in three ways. First, I'm going to tell you the things that you do know about her. Then I'm going to tell you the things that you should know about her, and then I'm going to tell you a few things that you might not know about her. The things that you do know. Well, to begin with, I want to start with the first sentence of her bio, which in addition to being the best sentence in a bio that was ever written, tells you exactly who she is. Linda Sarsour is a working woman, racial justice and civil rights activist, every Islamophobe's worst nightmare, and the mother of three. She is all of those things. Each are important, none are severable, and she refuses to let those or any other categories limit her vision, her work, or even her being. She's the executive director of the Arab American Association of New York and co-founder of the first Muslim online organizing platform, Empower Change. Linda has been at the forefront of major civil rights campaigns, including for a call to an end to unwarranted surveillance of New York's Muslim communities and ending police abuses like stop and frisk. In the wake of the police murder of Mike Brown, she co-founded Muslims for Ferguson to build solidarity amongst American Muslim communities and encourage work against police brutality. She's a member of the Justice League NYC, which is a leading New York City force of activists, formerly incarcerated individuals, and artists working to reform New York City Police Department and the criminal justice system. She's received numerous awards. Can't go into all of them. Champion of Change by the White House. Should we start with that one? She won the Champion of Change from the White House, the YWCA's USA Women of Distinction Award for Advocacy and Civil Engagement, and an award from the Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee. Linda was named one amongst 500 of the most influential Muslims in the world, which, if you think about it, is saying something. Most recently, Linda was profiled in the front page of the New York Times Metro section. Did you all see that? She was dubbed Brooklyn Homegirl in a Hijab. Linda is, the things that you should know, is that Linda is extraordinarily strategic. As a leader, she has mastered the two greatest lessons that anyone who aspires to leadership should know. One, people will follow you because they choose to and not because you want them to. And two, never ask anyone to do something that you wouldn't do yourself. More on lesson one later. But as for lesson two, Linda does not only talk the talk, she walks the walk. And by that I don't really actually mean that rhetorically. She literally walks the walk. Linda co-chaired the March to Justice, which was a 250-mile journey on foot to Washington, D.C., to deliver a justice package to end racial profiling, demilitarize police, and demand the government invest in young people and communities. That's 250 miles on foot, in heels. Not only that, amongst her many accomplishments, Linda was also instrumental in the Coalition for Muslim School Holidays to push New York City to incorporate 2 Muslim high holy holidays in the New York City public school calendar. And because of her efforts, New York City is now the largest school system in the country to officially recognize these holidays. And just reflecting on these 2 achievements, I would be remiss if I didn't note that the only other person that I know who both led a march to Washington and secured government holidays was the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Some things that you don't know about Linda. Linda doesn't get nervous often, but I bet she's nervous now. I've worked with Linda for years, for many, many years, meeting her for the first time in San Francisco several years ago. And her first words to me were, "Vince Warren, we need to keep it spicy up in here." By spicy, she was referring to her penchant and talent for shaking up the status quo, for telling truth no matter where it may lead, and being fiercely accountable to her people. The most important thing to note is that my people are also her people. All of our people are her people, so long as they remain awake to and dissatisfied with the manner in which the most vulnerable amongst us are treated. Linda is fierce, of course, but she also loves to have fun. She has a wicked, "Oh, yes, I did say that" sense of humor, and can be credited with single-handedly bringing blue eyeshadow back to the movement. At one point in Miami, working with the Dream Defenders, Linda and other activists took over the Florida State House. They just took it over in order to secure the repeal of the Stand Your Ground laws and others that contribute to the deaths of Black and brown people. And you might ask yourself, do you have the courage to take over the governor's office? And if you did, what would you do when you got there? Do you know what Linda did? She did the electric slide. I'm not kidding. Taking over, they are camping out in the governor's office, and this coalition of activists who want to have fun and want to talk about how important it is, recognizing how hard it is, did the electric slide. It's on Instagram, and I can prove it. Which brings us back to lesson 1. As a leader, people choose to follow her. They choose to listen to her. They choose to consult with her. She is deeply respected and honored in both the legal community, the organizing community, and the artists community. Social change simply is not possible without people like Linda. I am deeply privileged to have worked with her on a range of issues. I consider her not only a friend and colleague, I consider her family. I love her dearly. Ladies and gentlemen, Linda Sarsour.
I don't even know what to say. And Vince knows something about me. I don't get quite speechless ever. But I want to say I am even more humbled and honored to be here in this space with you all this evening. I am grateful for the friendship and fearlessness of Vince and the Center for Constitutional Rights. I actually do this work with the kind of confidence I have because I'm like, wherever they're going to send me, CCR is going to find me, and I'm going to be all right. Someone asked me earlier at the lunch, they said, what does community lawyering look like? Like, what are your good experiences? We want to know as young aspiring lawyers. And I said, you want to know what that looks like? Hang out with the Center for Constitutional Rights. They are true advocates of our community. They center the most marginalized voices. And when they defend the rights of those that are most marginalized, believe it that they had those conversations and that those plaintiffs are proudly sitting in those courtrooms believing that the lawyers at the Center for Constitutional Rights are sharing their stories and are defending their rights from a place of values and convictions and principles. And I am grateful every single day for the Center for Constitutional Rights, and in particular under the leadership of Vince Warren. So thank you, thank you, thank you every day for everything that you do. I'm just blessed just thinking about Ms. Sheinberg and this lecture that's been going on for 23 years. And one interesting thing that Vince didn't tell you about me that not many people know is that I was also an aspiring high school teacher. I wanted to be an English teacher. That was my life dream. I had this vision that I was gonna, that I'm old, so remember that Michelle Pfeiffer movie where she was like, she was a high school English teacher, and she was like inner city schools, and you were gonna get those kids to express themselves, and you were gonna help them see their potential. That was me. Literally, that was my life dream, but I'm not a teacher. But I felt connected to Ms. Sheinberg through her kind of progressive leftist, that's exactly who I wanted to be. So, it's 2016, and it's been a hell of a year. I can't wait. Anybody else can't wait till this darn year's over? Yeah, man, let me tell you. So there's a lot of things you probably already know about me. I'm a Muslim. I'm a daughter of immigrants. I am also Palestinian, and I'm a woman. Basically, you don't want to be me in 2016. And it's real out here, and I want to share, and people know me very well, and I'm known for, I'm from Brooklyn. Like, I just keep it real. Like, I'm Brooklyn and I'm Palestinian. Like, can't really, yeah. And I'm known for just keeping it real and just really allowing myself to speak the truth. And even if there are things that I say that make you feel uncomfortable, I want you to sit with that discomfort a little. I want you to weigh yourself in it, and it's okay. And I want you to know that, we live in New York City. We live in one of the most metropolitan, cosmopolitan, liberal, progressive cities in these United States of America, if not in the world. So this is where my words come from. Hate crimes against Muslims have risen exponentially. And I'm not even talking about the rest of the country for a second. I'm going to talk about right here in New York City. Just within the last few weeks, 2 religious leaders, imams, executed on the streets of Ozone Park. And just a few, maybe 10 days after that, a 60-year-old woman from Bangladesh, Nazma Khanum, was stabbed to death in her own community in Jamaica Hills, New York. When they found her, she still had her purse, beautiful gold bracelets were on. She wasn't robbed. She was stabbed in her own community. And just a few weeks after that, 2 women from Yemen in Brooklyn, broad daylight, pushing babies in strollers, were attacked by a woman who physically assaulted one in particular who was pushing a stroller, and a baby fell out of the stroller. This was here in New York City. A Muslim tourist comes here from Europe because she wants to come. Who doesn't want to come to New York City? She's out here by Valentino's. Like, I can't even afford to buy stuff from Valentino's. And she's walking out, and a man sets her shirt on fire. This is here in New York City, in our city. And we just, a few weeks ago, celebrated Eid al-Adha, which is one of the highest holy holidays for Muslims. And as I was preparing my children, and our families were preparing, and our mosques were getting ready, we were doing these outdoor prayers with thousands of people, there was a Muslim community in Fort Pierce, Florida, parents who had to explain to their young kids that actually, no, we can't go tomorrow to our mosque that we always go to, because some man decided to set our mosque on fire the day before a high holy holiday. And just maybe not even 10 days ago, 3 white men in Garden City, Kansas were arrested on domestic terrorism charges. They had a plan to plant 4 car bombs around a housing complex in a mosque that housed over 120 Somali Muslim refugees. And the FBI said that if that terror attack would have actually been implemented, which, by the way, was scheduled to happen on November 9th, the day after elections, we would have had 120 dead people, dead Americans, dead sisters and brothers on our watch here in the United States of America. I just read yesterday that a guy in Agora Hills outside of Los Angeles was arrested. He was arrested for documented threats against the Islamic Center of Southern California, which I've been to, which is a very beautiful mosque and a beautiful community, actually a very active and actively engaged community, very well loved by their neighbors. And when they went to this man's house, he had dozens of firearms, full magazines, and over 200 pounds of ammunition. Guess where this white man is? He's out on the streets of Southern California on bail. So you want to tell me how Muslims are supposed to feel safe in Southern California knowing the man that was threatening them and actually had the ammunition in his house that could have carried out the threats that he was making is walking around on the streets of Southern California. This is the reality that we live in these United States of America as Muslims. Now, when I say hate crimes and people think that when we talk about Islamophobia and Muslims, we think about, we think about racists and bigots and individual acts of hate. But not only do we have to deal with that and fear walking in our own cities and our own communities by our fellow Americans that want to harm us, but then we have to deal with systemic Islamophobia and racism that is implemented by the US government against our communities, including in places like New York City where through secret documents, not through paranoia or because we think it's happening, that's what people used to say before the Associated Press released Blockbuster, at least it was Blockbuster for everybody else. For me, it was like, thank you for confirming everything that I've been saying for the past 12 years, but okay. But for everyone else in New York, it was like, oh, this is really horrible, that the New York Police Department was engaging in unwarranted surveillance of 250 mosques, Islamic centers, Islamic schools as young as elementary to the Muslim student associations, including on places like the NYU campus. And including my organization, the Arab American Association of New York, where we were also in secret documents, where the New York Police Department had a bright idea to create a profile of a confidential informant that they thought would be quite spectacular to serve on the board of directors of my organization. Now, we don't know if that ever happened. How do you know for sure that our board of directors are not infiltrated with police informants? We just don't know for sure. And this is what surveillance does to a community. It's pretty much psychological warfare on a community, many of whom came from police states, right, fleeing the very things that are happening to Muslims in these United States of America. So when we think about Islamophobia or thinking about the environment that we live in, who's the most directly impacted and targeted? Women, right? I can't help the way that I look. You don't have to ask me where I'm from. You don't have to ask me what religion I follow. You already know because of the way that I look. And what's so unfortunate about that is that in these United States of America, a country supposedly founded on religious freedom, it is actually an act of courage to look like me and walk on these streets in this very country where many people from other religions actually came here because they thought, here is the country where we can practice our faith freely, where we don't have to be afraid of who we are. Now, when we think about Muslim women in particular, you think about two things. And this is, I blame a lot of people for this. And this is, by the way, I'm not an academic, so I'm giving you what I call an articulate rant for the next 20 minutes. But there are either two things that we are basically sold or we're consuming about Muslim women. We are either oppressed and victims of violence. That's one story, right? Or we're vulnerable and being recruited, right, as perpetrators of violence because we're being recruited by groups like ISIS, right? Or we're part of that group. And somehow, the majority of Muslim women in between, right, are literally absent. Like we don't exist, non-existent. And for me, that's the biggest problem that I face as a Muslim woman because we're here. We've been here. Not just here in the United States, but we've been here. We live in almost every country in this world. Muslim women are flourishing in every country in this world, including in Muslim majority countries, right? And we have important stories, both stories here in the United States as Muslim women, but also stories of Muslim women abroad, right? Even in places where we have made up these stereotypes of what Muslim women look like in Pakistan or in Yemen or in Palestine or in North Africa. We just are walking around with these perceptions, not based on reality, but based on some Hollywood film we watched, right? Or some article that's out of context in even in the liberal media or the progressive media, by the way. The great thing about Islamophobia, by the way, is it doesn't matter what part of the political spectrum that you're on, everybody's joining in on it. It pays whatever side of the spectrum on. So for those of you who think Bill Maher is a liberal, I'm talking to you. Now, so a lot of people say to me, Linda, like, you are an American Muslim woman, and you're just so damn unapologetic. Like, where does that come from? Like, I want to be like that. I'm not even Muslim. What is it? And what I tell people is that if I took it upon myself because of the type of public education that I had, and I'm a New York City public school, or the product of New York City public school, and I love public school, and I'm grateful for the teachers that I had. But they had little resources to work with, and we're working from curriculums where I didn't really get to see myself or understand what my role was, or where did I come up in the trajectory of American history. Like, that was just not the story that I was told. So I took it upon myself to do my own studying. And where I come from and why I am who I am is because I understand, people say heroes, and Vince said Dr. Martin Luther King, right? He said a hero, and there's so many heroes that we can think of. We can think of women and men, and so many heroes, right? But I always tell people there were heroes before the heroes, right? Like, we never talk about the heroes before the heroes because you might have not known what their names were. And for me, the heroes before the heroes is that I connect my own lineage, right, as a Muslim in this country, to enslaved people who were forced to come here. About 25 to 30% of those enslaved people were Muslim. And there are many books that you can read. I'm reading a book right now, Servants of Allah, that tells you the stories of these enslaved Muslims who came here to the United States, and there's a book called Prince of Slaves. But my point is that here were people, and by the way, the Muslim enslaved people in particular, they were, and of course others as well, but in particular the Muslim enslaved people, they were well educated. Some of whom were fluent in the Arabic language, some of whom were Islamic scholars, and believe it or not, some of whom belonged to the royal family. The slave trade literally didn't discriminate when they were enslaving the African people. So 25 to 30% of these enslaved people were Muslim. And what I always think about when I'm feeling down and I'm like, I hate this, and I don't like this, and why is this, and I'm just over this, right? This is what I think. My mind takes me to these enslaved people who were forced to come to this country, who were Muslim, and somehow, I don't even know how did these people figure out how to stay Muslim? How do you figure out how to stay faithful and connected to your religion, right? I read stories where, based on the sunset and the sunrise, they knew when to pray. I read stories that based on the seasons, they knew when the different Islamic months were. So they knew when it was Ramadan, right? They might have been off a little bit, but it was all about the intention. So I think to myself, if enslaved people could figure out how to be Muslim under the watch of slave masters, why am I going to be frightened about being Muslim in 2016? Because I will never understand the sacrifices, right, of those Muslims. And that's where I take my confidence from, my courage from, my resilience from, because someone risked their actual life for me to be Muslim in America in 2016. And for me, those stories give me inspiration. And remember, the enslaved people were black Muslims. And what I take inspiration from is living in 2016, that I'm Muslim, but imagine our black Muslim sisters and brothers who have to be black and Muslim in 2016. Now, I've been old enough to be part of many elections if I wanted to, right? And I never really decided that that was what I wanted to do. But in 2016, I felt a different way as a Muslim woman, as a person from a marginalized community, a vilified community, a victimized community. I felt a different way. And what I did this 2016 is I wanted to get off the political margins, and I wanted to bring my community's voice to the center. Because I was tired of a conversation that was about us without us. And I told this to my community many times before. I said, look, when you're not part of the conversation, what happens? The conversation is about you. And I wasn't going to allow there to be a conversation that did not include the voices of people from my community. So during this election, I joined the Bernie Sanders campaign. I'm still heartbroken about that, by the way, but I'll get over it eventually. And, you know, people were like, Bernie Sanders? I said, look, let's get something straight. I don't really get inspired by old white guys. And Bernie Sanders wasn't exactly the most charismatic man in America, right? He was definitely no Malcolm X. But what I was intrigued by when it came to the Bernie Sanders campaign, I was intrigued by a few things. One was his authenticity and his genuinity. The guy just kept it real, and I'll tell you this, he's from Brooklyn. Like, he just can't help himself. It's just you're from Brooklyn, just say it like it is. So I was intrigued by that. But I was also intrigued by the people that were part of the campaign. And this is where, when we talk about the erasure of people and minority communities in particular, and women of color in particular, that was happening across the board, in particular on the Bernie Sanders campaign. I was so tired of people saying that the Bernie Sanders campaign was a campaign of young white folks, because it wasn't. Were they there? Sure. Were they out there? Were they with us? Were they down with Bernie? Were they feeling the burn? They sure were. But to erase Muslims who, because of our participation in the primaries, gave Bernie Sanders the biggest political upset in US history in a state like Michigan, which Nate Silver, one of the most accurate pollsters, said Hillary had it 99%. And then we showed up on election day, and the story was that the Muslim community helped Bernie Sanders ride to victory in the state of Michigan. When people like Nadia Stevens, who was the New York State director, a powerful political black woman in the state of New York, was leading the campaign in New York. When our New York State political director for the campaign, Michelle Egeli, who's also a black woman, when Simone Sanders, one of the most powerful politicals on the national level, who was the national press secretary for Bernie Sanders, when these voices of women of color were being erased, I was a national surrogate for Bernie Sanders. Rosario Dawson is Puerto Rican. Like, the fact that we were not the focus of a campaign like Bernie Sanders goes back to why we're talking about where are the Muslim women voices. It's not that there aren't black women who are powerful and active. It's not that there are Muslim women who are silent and are waiting for you to tell them to get up and speak. The question is, why are you not listening, right? The question is, why are we allowing there to be an erasure of one of the most powerful groups of people in this country, and they are women of color. Leading every movement, at every front line, at every arrest line, it is women of color in these United States of America. Now, things that bother me is when people see people like me, they think I'm an anomaly, right? They're like, wow, look at her. You know, she's really defying those darn stereotypes. Wow, shattering them. That's just, man, those men in her community must be up in arms. Darn it, she must be risking her life as a Muslim woman speaking up and speaking out. And what bothers me about that is that what I do is not in spite of my Islam and my community. It is exactly because of the fact that I am Muslim that I have courage and conviction and principles and values. That is why I do this work. I want people to look at me and say, she is who she is because she is a Muslim woman. And that's not the conversation that we are allowed to have, because somehow, because I live in the United States of America, I have to be grateful. This is where the trolls come in. I have to be grateful, right? Because I don't live in Saudi Arabia. The fact that in this country, people have, basically what they're doing is they're making money off of the propagation of misinformation about Islam. There is an Islamophobia industry in this country, and it's not conspiracy. Like, I'm Arab, I know, conspiracy theorists, that's what we do. But this time I'm serious. Look, there is an Islamophobia industry. There are actual entire organizations in this country, Act for America, the Center for Security Policy, by the way, these people are actually advisors to presidential candidates. This is where the hot mess comes in. And many of whom are registered hate groups by the Southern Poverty Law Center and other groups who track basically white supremacist and nativist groups. And these people get paid. Like, they wake up every morning and they are propagating this idea that Islam is an oppressive religion. They propagate, that the support of violence and extremism and terrorism, in Islam, and all this other stuff that you watch on national television when you click on your TV every single day. And these folks are, and one of the reasons why someone wrote in my bio that I'm every Islamophobe's worst nightmare is because people like me come up and they're just like, damn, she just messes up the whole thing. Like, she is the opposite right, of everything that we're saying, right? And oftentimes what they're saying is that my religion oppresses me, that my religion intimidates and silences me, right? When in fact, the irony of the situation is that the people who silence me and intimidate me and send me death threats are not other Muslims. They're not extremist Muslims. They are mostly white supremacists, the alt-right, and right-wing Zionists. These are the people who are telling me that I should go back to Saudi Arabia when in fact in this country I am oppressed by white supremacy and right-wing Zionism. This is the irony of the whole situation. So I live in the United States of America, in the land of democracy and freedom, the land of free speech, and I am attacked for engaging in democracy and free speech by those who say that I don't deserve or should be grateful to live in these United States of America. Now, oftentimes, people say that, Islam is a religion of peace. I don't know, I'm not moved by that. Are people moved? I don't know, I don't get moved, even when my own people say that. That's not why I am proud to be Muslim. I'm proud to be Muslim because what's more important about Islam is not that it's a religion of peace, which it is. It's a religion of justice, right? So when people see me and they say, what is this light-skinned Palestinian girl doing working on Black Lives Matter? People ask, believe it or not, I get asked that. And I say to people, well, you got a lot to learn. I said, first of all, I'm Muslim. That doesn't do anything for them. And I say to them that Islam, or Muslims, and let's talk specifically about Muslims in the United States of America, 1/3 of my community is Black. 1 out of every 3 Muslims is African American. So when you see people like me, women in hijab, or people who tell you they're Muslim, I'm out here fighting for my own sisters and brothers first. For me, I don't like people to look at me and say, oh, Linda's an ally, or a light-skinned ally, because I'm not white, so let's not just get in that. So for me to project my religion, right, and the way that I do that is I don't want to tell people what Islam is. I don't want to sit you down and tell you, here's the 5 pillars of Islam. I want you to feel my Islam. And the way that I show you what my Islam is I want you to see me when you need me, right? I want you to know that when you see Muslim women on the front lines of social justice movements, it's not because we think it's the right thing to do, which it is, or we think it's the cool thing to do. It is what our religion tells us to do. And oftentimes, one of the biggest, the trolls are just outrageous, but, there's a lot of misinformation about the Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him. And what I always tell people, I don't really care what the Islamophobes think about my beloved Prophet. I just care what I think about him, right? That our Prophet was in himself a racial justice activist. And if people study the life of the Prophet, which I have, he himself was a racial justice activist. And one of the first people that he had appointed to do the call to prayer in Mecca was a Black man. That was a deliberate choice. To show that there is no hierarchy of race or skin color, right? Our beloved Prophet was an environmental justice activist. This idea that this earth was given to us by our God and our responsibility to take care of it. We think about human rights. I remember one time being at a labor rally for living wage, and I heard this imam, and it was so profound. Even people were like, wow. There is a hadith that was narrated by our Prophet that said, pay the worker before the sweat on his forehead dries. This is the principles of justice in our religion. Immigration. When people talk about we don't want the refugees, maybe we'll take the Christian ones. I want them to think about that when they're doing the little nativity thing that they do in front of their houses. When that Palestinian Jewish refugee, right? It just boggles my mind, the logic of those that hate. That in fact, if they actually went back and just got into, because most of them, by the way, are the religious people, right? That's what Christ said. I said, I don't know what Christ you talking about, but yeah, because he was a Palestinian Jew. That's what I know, and he was not white, and he did not have blonde hair either. But that's a lecture for next year. Now, I think people know me too, I want to work. And, Vince said this about me, and it's something that we all have to check ourselves and check our intentions, why we do what we do. And for me, this is just who I am. I will never ask you to do something that I myself would not do. And I tell this all the time to, in particular to those I organize with, most of whom are people of color and most of whom are Black. I say to people, look, I'm ready to die for what I believe in. I have no fear. I accept whatever destiny that is for me. But what I will say is when I say things like never again and not on my watch, I mean it, because it's not going to happen on my watch. And while it may continue to happen, I'm not going to be around to see it, because I know I'm going to risk my life to make sure it doesn't happen where I get to witness it. And it reminds me of a story. I went to lecture at a university in Ohio, and a young Muslim boy stood up. He was 19 years old, and he said, he had a question in the question and answer part, and he said, Sister Linda, I want to know who lived in this country at the time of Japanese internment camps. And I was standing on that stage, and I was thinking to myself, what is this kid trying to ask me? And he kept on, and he was really passionate about it, he thought about it, it's been lingering in his mind and his heart, he's been thinking about it. He said, I want to know who those Americans were that allowed for their Japanese neighbors and for their kids to be picked up and put on camps on this USO. Who were those people? And he was so outraged, and he just sat down. And I didn't have an answer to his question. And then a couple of days later, I'm sitting in my office in New York City, in Brooklyn, and all of a sudden, his voice kind of started haunting me, I heard the question again. And I said to myself, I know who those people were. They were good people, but they were the silent majority. That's who they were. They were people that allowed this to happen on their watch. And the reason why I tell you that story is because one of the most important things to me right now, when we think about this idea of intersectionality, is that Islamophobia is just a branch on a larger tree of racism in this country. And when people say, oh, we want to end Islamophobia, ain't nobody ending nothing. Because I'm not going to end Islamophobia when we still have had centuries of racism in this country, right? When we just keep doing the same thing, just naming it new things, like when we went from slavery and now we just call it mass incarceration. I know that. When I understand that we have people in this country, corporations in these United States of America, who profit off of the incarceration of mostly people of color, I understand that. When people say, and I've heard this during the elections too, people heard, oh, we got to register those Muslims in databases, right? And what was the response? Nope, not on our watch. That sounds like Nazi Germany. And I'm sitting in my office being like, people, we did that in 2003. From 2003 to 2011, we were registering Muslim men from 29 majority countries, and we have a whole database of them with their fingerprints and their pictures. And guess what happened? 10% of those 180,000 men were deported from this country. And probably God knows how many more who were afraid of just the process in itself were like, let me pack my family up and I'm going back to Pakistan and Bangladesh, which happened, for folks that know, out here in Coney Island, one of the largest Pakistani communities outside of Pakistan. That already happened. And when did it happen? On our watch, right? From 2003 to 2011. People were outraged when Ted Cruz was like, oh, we got to patrol the Muslim neighborhoods. Everybody's like, what do you mean? Muslims live in every community. That's really outrageous. We got to go on CNN and hold that man accountable to his words. I was like, really, people? We already patrol Muslim neighborhoods. We already have entire Muslim communities under unwarranted surveillance simply based on the faith that we follow. So there's a lot of righteous indignation where people are really good at being like, no, it's 2016. We don't go backwards, we go forwards. No, we've been going backwards. In this post 9/11 America, we've created a true police state. And people of color, right, are at the center of that police state, right? Political activism in this country. So my call to action for you is not to hear things and say, oh, nope, we're not going to let that happen. I want you to hear from communities who are directly impacted that it's already happening, right? Our kids are already being incarcerated. People say Guantanamo Bay, we got to close Guantanamo Bay. And where has President Obama? He lied to us. He didn't close Guantanamo Bay. Sisters and brothers, we have something called Guantanamo North on the soil of these United States of America in places like Indiana, called communication management units that were created in 2006. Muslims were maybe because I just want to exaggerate. Maybe we're like 1.7% of the US population. People say we're 1%, but I just added that 0.7 because I think we're undercounted. But let's say we're 1% of the US population. We make up over 80% of the communication management units, which are 23 hours a day, solitary confinement. We have no access to the media. We have no access to newspapers. We have limited access to our immediate family. We have to pick one family member only, limited access to lawyers, and even with the family member that we do have access to, right, we are only allowed to talk about certain things. So even our limitations to being able to speak freely with our loved ones, like that is Guantanamo, but it's here on this US soil. So there are things that are happening already on our watch, right? When we think, oh, Donald Trump, we can't let that white man be president, white supremacy. There's a lot of bad things happening, and Donald Trump is not really the president yet, right? So when we think about deportation, oh, deportation, he wants to deport all, undocumented immigrants. Well, that's horrible. We've been deporting 1,000 immigrants every single day. Actually, President Obama has deported more immigrants than any other administration prior to him, right? So my call to action for you is that I feel like and this is not for people in this room because you are all politically inclined people. You are here because you care about something. You are here because you have a genuine sense of, interest, or even many of you who I know are already engaged in a lot of movement work and social justice work. But really calling on people to say, like, there are things happening on our watch now. And there are things happening right here in New York City, right? When we had to wait for 2 years for the Department of Justice to tell me that they're filing charges against Officer Pantaleo, who killed Eric Garner on video for all of you to watch, and I needed 2 years for some guy in Washington, D.C. to tell me that he did the wrong thing and he violated someone's rights. Like, this is the country that we live in, and it is absolutely outrageous that we stand back and allow these things to happen. And I tell people all the time that one of the biggest, attacks that I get from the alt-right in particular is they say to me, you're unpatriotic, right? You are un-American because I criticize the government or I criticize the status of communities in this country. And I tell people all the time, I say, if anything, and if there was a picture next to the word patriot or patriotic in the dictionary, it would have my face next to it. I'll tell you why. Because for me, a patriot, someone who's American and loves their country, I love my country so much that I know that my country has the potential to be better, right? When people say the greatest nation, I don't like people who say we live in the greatest nation on earth. It really bothers me, right? Because it makes it seem like we already hit where we need to be. And it doesn't allow us to think that what's the potential, how much more farther can we be so we could truly be the greatest nation on earth. When we will be the greatest nation on earth is when a Muslim woman like me can walk down the streets of New York City and feel safe at any time of night, right? When a young black boy with a book bag can walk into a train station and not be held suspect for something he didn't do just for being black and walking in the streets, right? When an undocumented person could walk home and actually in their heart know that they're going to get home to their children and not be stopped by CBP before they get there and snatched from their families. We'll be the greatest nation on earth when we're not the holders of the largest prison population in the world in these United States. That's when we'll be the greatest nation on earth. So I ask all of you in this room that we not be distracted by this current circus of an election, this mortifying public display of democracy to the rest of the world, when we have basically a rapist, misogynist, xenophobic, racist, white supremacist that thinks he could lead the free world, right? And on the other side, and I know that there's a big comparison there, but let's be real, people, like we are projecting, warmongering, right? A war hawk on the other side. And I know that we have a choice to make in this election. I am a person with strategy, right? And the way that I'm working this election is I'm working from the premises of who do I want my opponent in the White House to be? Who do I want to be a social justice activist under, right? Do I want to be a social justice activist under a law and order regime, under white supremacists, those supported by the Ku Klux Klan? Because the Ku Klux Klan has always been around. But the interesting thing and what I fear about them more, and I'm not afraid of them, but fearing the climate that we're in, is that they used to wear hoods, right? Because they wanted to be anonymous. They didn't want you to know who they were. Guess what they're doing now? They're just outwardly racist. And they took their hoods off, and they're standing armed in front of mosques, intimidating worshipers. They're coming to counter-protest Black Lives Matters, right? They started the Blue Lives Matter movement. It's not beyond me where we are and where we're going as a nation. So I understand the risks, and if there is anyone that understands, it's a Palestinian Muslim woman from Brooklyn. So I know. But I want people to keep the administration and hold their feet to the fire. And that starts on November 9th. Because what we did with Obama is we were like, okay, got this, right? We got a Black president. He's a community organizer. He's from Chicago. We got this. He knows what he needs to do when he gets in there. We could all go back to what we were doing. And we trusted in that process. And it's not that President Obama didn't know what he needed to do, but we didn't continue to create the political will and the political environment on the outside so President Obama could be like, look, I got to do this because these folks outside are not going to let me hear the last of it if I don't do it. So we didn't help him, right, in the way that we should have, and we would have gotten a lot more done in the past 8 years, right? And we also wouldn't have lost in 2010 to the Tea Party, right, which was the first wave of white supremacists flexing their muscles, right, because they did it, and they did it politically. So what I'm saying to you is that I'm committed, and I will say this here for the record, that is I'm committed to November 9th. I'm committed to January 21st to hold the feet of the next president of the United States of America. And as a woman, as a social justice activist, as a Muslim, yeah, I'm hoping it's Hillary, right? Because if it's not, I might not be out in the streets. I may be somewhere else where the CCR is going to have to come look for me. Hashtag Free Linda, I'm just saying. Y'all better have my back with that one. So I just want to say that I'm praying that we all find the moral courage to stand up for what is right and not worry about the consequences, that there were people before us who also did that. And sometimes we got to be the ones, and we really can't be waiting for anybody else. And the questions I ask myself all the time, and you may think I'm crazy, sometimes I sit in my office and I think about people 100 years from now, like I'll be dead by then. Well, basically we're all not going to be here, just so you know. I always think about Muslims in particular. I always say Muslims 100 years from now, and I always think about like what kind of conversations are they going to be having. And I always have this nightmare that there are going to be some Muslims somewhere sitting in a basement, and they're going to be real quiet, and they're going to be whispering to each other. They're going to say, you know, why are we so afraid to be Muslim? Why are our women not wearing hijab? Why are we not naming our kids Muslim names? Like what's going on? What were those Muslims doing? What were people doing 100 years ago that we're so afraid to be who we are? Why didn't they stand up for us? Why didn't they defend our rights to be Muslim in this country? And that really is a nightmare for me. And what I hope that you want is you want people 100 years from now to say, man, those people in 2016, 2017, they were some courageous people. Those people were not having that. Those people were consistent, and they stood up for the rights of all people. And it is because of those that lived in 2016 and 2017 and 2018 that we could be proud to be Muslim in this country. We could be free and Black in America. Like, I want people to say about us, like, I want people to say I was a hero. That's what I'm going for here. I want people to say, yeah, there were a lot of Lindas and Alicias and Opals. Those were our heroes. And I will say for you folks in this room, and I'll end by saying this, you know, where I get inspiration from, believe it or not, in the movement work that I've been doing is from Black women. I have learned something that I never thought that I could experience, and I can't explain to you the feeling because you have to engage in it to know it, is this idea of radical love, right? That you love your people so much, like so deep, right? That's where your activism comes from, right? This revolutionary radical love. And Black women, with all that they have seen, and none of us can say we've seen anything near what Black women have seen in this country and continue to see and experience, that they could still find a way to have radical love for the communities that they come from, that they can still sacrifice and risk to live in a country that upholds not only their dignity and humanity, but the dignity and humanity of all people. I am moved by that every single day, and I do this work with them in mind because they are leading this movement. And if you ain't following a Black woman, then you are, I don't know what movement you're a part of, but you're in the wrong movement. We will win. I will tell you this right now. And the reason why I am an activist is that I have hope. And if I didn't have hope, I wouldn't be doing it. I'll be sitting in corporate America right now. The reason why I do this work is I have hope. And I have hope because I believe that we all will be liberated at the hands of black women in this country. And when black people are free, I will tell you this, you are all gonna be free. And even if you are white in this room, I am telling you that you are not sitting in your full humanity in this room, because you cannot be in your full humanity if your fellow Americans are also not living in their full humanity. And we will all live in our full humanity when all of us are treated with dignity and respect in these United States of America. Thank you very much. Yeah, sure.
Hi there. My name's Blythe Hawthorne-Loazo, and I want to ask a question about gender. I find that social justice warriors have a hard time talking about women today, especially when intersectionality comes up, and especially when there are really painful issues that I, as a white ally, will never be able to even come close to comprehending. But I have found that the oppression of women that still exists, and women as a group that still exists, is something that social justice movements are not comfortable talking about. We quickly move to broaden to the queer movement and to gender nonconforming people, which I think is an incredibly important issue, but there is something for me that still speaks about the power of women as a group. And Nate Silver's map couldn't have said it more beautifully, that when if only women voted, the country would be blue. But if men voted, and if poor, uneducated white men voted, the country would be red. That is a gender issue. So I'm wondering if you could talk to your womanness for a little bit, outside of your Muslim womanness, outside of the intersectionality that is real, because it's still real for me, even as a white ally.
It's a great question. I think, women as a group, right? We have been a target group in this particular election, and groups that stand up for the reproductive rights of women have always been targets of the alt-right, right? There are men in this country, most often all-male panels talking about what I should be doing with my body. I think what's interesting about the gender issue is also that, yes, women are all a group. Yeah, sure. Yes, we are women as a group, right? But even within the group, there is an issue of understanding, are all women the same, right? So for example, when I think about the reproductive rights movement, I think about why aren't there more women of color in the reproductive rights movement? Why aren't there more Muslim women in the reproductive rights movement? Oftentimes when we think about feminism, right? Now feminism is a really powerful word. And often in the beginning, maybe like 10 years ago, I wasn't really feeling feminism. I don't call myself a feminist, right? Only recently, till I started studying black feminism, then I was like, oh, maybe this feminism is speaking to me right now. And the reason why I say that is because in the way that we have looked upon women on the other side of the world as, quote, Western feminists, is that we are going to save the women of the other side of the world, right? We are the savers of the third world country women. And by doing that, we have erased history of strong and powerful women of color all over the world, some of whom who have been heads of state, well-educated, right? People who we could take inspiration from, anywhere from the president of Liberia, right, to the Benazir Bhutto in Pakistan. I'm talking like countries like Georgia who've had Muslim women like we out here being like, we about to have the first woman president, and the Muslim community, the Muslim majority countries actually, some of whom have been way farther ahead than we have, right? So I think that our womanness is important, and us acting from a place of womanness or as a group is important, but there's so much complexities and even unity within that particular category of gender that's really something that we haven't figured out how to address right in ourselves. So for even sometimes when I watch these, you know, most of whom are in Europe, or they do that here too, but where they want to go protest like Muslims and they like, I don't know, they like are like topless, and I'm like, that's cool if that's what you want to do, but like, don't tell me you're being topless makes you more or less oppressed than I am because I feel like I want to cover my body. Like, there's also this misconception around hijab, right? So for like, when we talk about being a woman and being part of a larger group, like this idea that I choose, right, to be modest. That's just my choice, right? You have a choice to wear a miniskirt if you want to. On issues of sexual harassment, right, and street harassment, just because I'm a covered woman doesn't mean that I'm not a victim of sexual assault or street harassment, for example. And there's, again, conversations that are exclusive, right? And that don't include different voices even amongst women who, by the way, are quite a diverse group of people, right? We're for every ethnic, racial, socioeconomic status. So I think, to your point, I think it is important for us to flex our political muscle as a group of women. But within that, we also have a lot of work as women to create an inclusive movement that empowers all women. Even when we talk about equal pay, right, we still have to look that even on the spectrum of equal pay, there are still Latino women that get paid less than black women, that get paid less than white women. Like, there's also class issues within some of the kind of women's rights issues that we're working on. So that also sometimes is not part of the equation. When we talk about undocumented women, like, where do they fit into the larger movements that we are also a part of as well? So I think it's complex, but I agree with you as a woman. I'm very proud of my womanness. And I do say, you know, she, when people ask me for my preferred gender pronoun, I think that we still are here and we could express that as well. But we have a lot of work to do to make it inclusive. I just talked about moral courage like 5 minutes ago, people. If you got something, even if you think it's a question that you're not sure about and you think I'm gonna trust me, I've heard way worse than anything you're ever gonna ask me. So this is your moment.
Okay, so this is a very personal question. And it just is to benefit me. You talked in the very beginning about the two kind of stereotypes of Muslim women, right? There's the oppressed, kind of quiet, meek Muslim woman that I think like Donald Trump talked about when
Kasala Khan.
Yeah. And then there's like the angry, radical Muslim woman that's, you know, aiding terrorist movements. And I just think like this is something that I've felt throughout all of my life. Like when I'm too quiet, I feel like I'm being like grouped into that first category. When I'm too loud, when I'm angry about these things, I'm part of the second category. And I just don't understand how to get the courage to speak about things that I care about. I just want to ask you how you do it, because it's really important.
I was you just maybe 10 years ago, right? And I was never the meek Muslim or the meek woman, but I always worried about the perception of others of me, right? Was I gonna be like the angry Arab, right? Or the angry Muslim woman who needs to go back to her country if you don't like it here, right? I always thought about that. Or because I was Palestinian, did I want to talk about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict because I do have family that lives there and I should be able to speak about that here in these United States of America. And I always was worried about what everybody else thought. And then one day my Brooklyn really came out and I talked to myself and I was like, I said, you know what? I don't give a damn what anybody thinks about me. Literally, I was talking to myself. And I was like, why am I holding back really important things and I'm not seeing my perspective anywhere, right? And I literally was like sitting with myself in my house and I'm like, it was actually, believe it or not, let me see, what year are we in? It was like 2000, it was like 2006. And I was just like, that's it. It's my time. And when I put myself in that context where I was like, who's better than I am, right? Like, who are these people, these like imaginary people that I'm worried about who is gonna think something bad or ill of me? Then I realized that those people were gonna think ill of me regardless of what I said. I could be good or bad. I could be saying things they agree with or they don't. That's their thing. They're just going to always oppose me. So one of the most powerful tools that we have, in our possession is social media. And I started using social media as a way for me to project my principles and values and the things that I care about. And all of a sudden, I went from believing that social media was almost like an empty space that nobody cared about, that I was just kind of just giving stuff to. And all of a sudden, my stuff was going viral. Why? Because people are like, darn it, I never thought about that. Or this is a voice that I don't hear often, right? So what I want you to, doesn't matter who you are, right? Because this is not just a struggle of, Muslim women. It's a struggle of people who just feel misunderstood or just feel unheard. And a lot of, even in the Black Lives Matter movement, it took social media, right? Like, for example, black people have always been getting killed by law enforcement in this country. I'm sorry, I hope I'm not providing any new information. But what happened was, having digital tools available to communities, we just started hearing about them more often, because now people were taking news into their own hand and they were forcing you into grappling with something that already existed. So when it came to, for me, I just started putting my thoughts out there. And then I was like, okay, so it looks like there's some people that don't agree with me. And looks like there are some really vicious and nasty people out here. There's so many of those, by the way. Like, I feel like half of my Twitter followers are trolls, literally. So I don't get, like, I'm not the kind that's like, darn it, I have a lot of followers. I'm like, half of them are not my friends. And then the other 9 million that are probably out there in this country, I blocked because they're like super vicious. But I realized that I had an important story, and I realized that I'm just gonna put my voice out there, and I'm gonna be willing to take whatever comes with it. And yes, it comes with ugly, but it has also come with profound support from people all across this country, people who are like, I got you, I'm with you, people who ask me, can I share this, right? Can I take this story? And I'll tell you a really quick story that I just posted on Facebook just like a couple of days ago. And it was my way of also sharing the stories of my community. Oftentimes I share other people's stories because I finally have my own platform that is visible enough where I can give other people in my community platform. And I'm just tell you a quick story just so you can understand the mindset of some Muslims in this country right now. And I think this would, if anything doesn't scare you, this will. I was in Ohio, just like a couple of weekends ago, and I was with a young white woman, and we were canvassing. And when you canvass, right, they give you a list of people to knock on their doors. Now, I was walking, and there was a house, and I saw an old man outside, like on a porch, and then I saw a woman open the door who was in hijab, and she passed him a glass of water and just went right back in. Now, I look again, and there's this house with this old man sitting outside drinking some water, and there was a Trump sign outside. And my mind immediately was like, this doesn't go together. And my partner, who was this wonderful young white woman who I had known also from the Bernie Sanders campaign, she was like, Linda, like, that house ain't on our list. I was like, I know that house ain't on our list. I said, just, you gotta give me a minute. So she was like, no, but we're only, like, acting like I never did this before. Like, but we're only supposed to knock on the doors on our list. I was like, trust me, I know what I'm doing. I need to have a moment with my people. So I walk up to this porch and I say, Assalamu alaikum to this man. And I had a nice conversation with him, and he spoke to me in Arabic and, asked me what I was doing there, who I was, and just very nice, regular old guy. And then I mustered up the courage, because when you're with your elders, it's a little different. Like, my courage is a little like, okay, let's act now. Now, I mustered up the courage to be like, so, you got a Trump sign outside. Like, I just wanted to know, like, what's going on here? So he was like, yeah. He's like, I just feel safe. I just feel safe with it outside. And it reminded me about something else about organizing, where we don't judge people, right? We are very judgmental, especially people who are like racial justice, civil rights, human rights activists. Like, we're always so self-righteous, like we know what you're supposed to think and do, right? And if you don't think like we think, And when he said that, never in my wildest dream would I have ever thought that someone would put a Trump sign outside of their home as a way to repel, right? And to feel safe. Like, I just never thought that might be why someone would do that. So I continued a couple of more seconds, and I was pretty speechless. Like, I didn't know what to say to that, right? How do you tell someone what safety looks like for them? That's what it looks like for him in Ohio. And then I said, And then in my mind, I went back to being judgmental. I was like, yeah, that's good to know, that bro, but he definitely ain't voting for Trump, right? Like, he just has that outside because he's feeling safe. So that makes sense to me now. So then I mustered up the courage again to say, try to be a little snarky, you know, try to be a little witty. I was like, oh, like, but that doesn't mean you're voting for Trump, right? And he was looking at me like with his really sad eyes, and he actually looked away. And he said, you know, I might vote for him. He's like, look, he's like, but what happens if he loses? Like, there is going to be a lot of really angry people out there. And he's like, you think those people are just going to just go on with their lives? He's like, who do you think they're going to take revenge on? Who do you think? It's going to be you and me. And he just really sad, like almost ashamed. And I'll be honest with you, it was another one of those moments where I was like, what am I supposed to say to that? Because I have no confirmation, right? That I was going to be able to say to him, no, uncle, like, don't worry, like, it's going to be great on November 9th. Like, we got you. Like, I couldn't say that. And I was able to share his story without giving his name, because I wanted people not to be judgmental and to understand the real state of where we are as a country. And just wanted to share with you this that just happened today. There's a former congressman, his name is Joe Walsh. He's a former Illinois congressman. So like, this is the important part. He's a former, right, member of the House of Representatives of these United States of America. And this is what he said today. He said, on November 8th, I'm voting for Trump. On November 9th, if Trump loses, I'm grabbing my musket. You in? This is I'm not even going to use this word because it's a lie, but for other people, not for me, he was a distinguished member of the House of Representatives from the state of Illinois. He's not from Mississippi, you know what I mean? And here's a man who represented constituencies in Congress, basically calling people to arms on November 9th. And this just happened today, and this really solidified for me where this old man in Ohio was coming from. There's something, we have a saying in Arabic that says, there is no smoke without fire, right? That people really believe this is happening. And, you know, when I saw that, I just saw that from Joe Walsh, and I think about all these things that I told you, the guys in Garden City, the guy in Agoura, the guy in Fort Pierce, Florida. And I think to myself, like, we really got to wake the hell up, right? We got to wake up. We have predominantly white men in this country who do not know how to deal with a changing demographic, who feel like they're losing grip of power in this country, and they're angry about it. And because of what white privilege has been able to do, because the man in Agoura Hills who had 200 pounds of ammunition in his house, right, and dozens of firearms, who was documented threatening the mosque, is out on bail. He's out on bail right now. So they think that they can do this, like a sitting congressman can call people to arms. You better believe the FBI ain't visiting his house. So these stories are the reality that we live in, and I'm asking all of you, share stories, be vocal, and don't be part of the silent majority where people say, where were you in 2016? You better be the people that people know who you are, because you were where you needed to be. And that, for me, is the scariest thing. And I'll just end with this. There was an article in the New York Times, I think it was yesterday, telling stories of these kids out in Staten Island, little Muslim kids, where the girl woke up, like a little 7-year-old girl woke up, you know, with a nightmare, and her father was telling the story, basically being like, and then Donald Trump came, and then this happened, and then they took us, and then they put us in this, you know, thing or whatever. And I thought to myself, could it just be a nightmare? Could that happen again? It happened before. And I always tell people, I said, what makes Muslims better than Japanese Americans? Like, I'm not more worthy than a Japanese American. Like, what makes it different? So maybe we could this time be different. Maybe this time there could be more people that are willing to stand up and say, not in our country, not at this time, and never again. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. So basically my question is, so I was born and raised in the Bronx, product of South Bronx Public Schools to a low-income Gambian family. And so basically, like, I'm very interested in like educational equity, educational reform policy, Black Lives Matter, Islamophobia, and all these other different issues, immigration. And it's like, how do you address issues like within our own community amongst people who feel like, based on like what they see in the media about like Black people, that you shouldn't like be advocating for those communities? Because a lot of times I've gotten into conversations with people who feel like, oh yeah, you see on the news like Black people are doing this and whatnot, and it's like, oh, they're in jail because they're doing like all these wrong things. So how do you respond to someone who's like sending off that kind of negativity?
I think that's a question that's really for everybody. It goes back to something Black people always say, which is get your cousins. We all have cousins. I don't care what community you're white, you have cousins. If you're Latino, you got those cousins, right? I'm Muslim, I got those cousins that I have to challenge, right? And sometimes when we hear that and they say, you know, when people say that whole like, but look at the Black on Black crime, like that's always a response to everything, right? Or when a young Black person unarmed is killed, people say, oh, but you know, he was in that store and like he stole something, you know, and there's always this people that are just trying to justify based on what they hear, to really sit and justify murder of people, right? Or people saying to me like, Linda, we got enough problems. Like, why are you out here for these Black people? We got our own problems in the community. Like that's like these things happen. And I think what we do is we have to challenge those. Like, so my father, and I'll just give you a really quick, so my father just recently retired, and my father was a small business owner out in Crown Heights. And for 45 years, my father owned a mini supermarket in Crown Heights in a predominantly Black community, right? And over the course of the time that my father owned that store, my father was held up a few times, you know, by young Black kids, right? As a matter of fact, you know, one time, you know, it got pretty violent to the point where actually a dog was let out on my father. Now, those experiences of individual interaction stick with people for a long time. You know, and I was a young person, like I didn't really listen to my parents. Like my parents didn't say racist things in front of me, but I'm sure they thought about them. And I had an uncle back in the 80s who was shot actually in his store out in Brownsville, right, by a young 60-year-old Black boy, right? Like these things happen, right? My family members own businesses in Black communities, so of course if there's gonna be violence, it's gonna be Black people. It's not because Black people are inherently more violent, it just happens to be those are the people that live in that neighborhood. Now, so when I started being more involved in the Black Lives Matter movement, and the first time is when I literally got on an airplane, I went to Ferguson, right? When I heard about Mike Brown, I was thinking to myself, here I am in Brooklyn, and here is a Black boy who gets shot, right? Unarmed Black boy gets shot, and if that wasn't bad enough, we let him lay outside on the streets for 4.5 hours swimming in his blood, right? If that wasn't bad enough, 4.5 hours after he sat swimming in his blood in the hot sun in an August hot sun, we pick him up like he's a bag of rocks and throw him in the back of an SUV. I was outraged. Like, you have no idea how outraged I was sitting in Brooklyn. I never even heard of Ferguson, by the way. I don't know if people knew there was a place called Ferguson. I didn't. I was so outraged, I literally got on an airplane, I went to Ferguson. And for me, it was an opportunity to go and bear witness. I wasn't there to tell anybody how to organize and what to do. I just wanted to be there. So when I came back, it was an opportunity to have these conversations and say, look, this is an unarmed kid who was killed in his community. And I sat with my family and I was like, this is what happened. And they did this to him in 4 hours. And my parents all of a sudden were like, wow, that's outrageous. And I've seen people, by the way, on my own social media who went from justifying and trying to find excuses, because that's what human beings do. They try to find reasons to rationalize why these things are happening. I got people from there, right, to watching people on my social media, literally 180 degrees, right, where they're joining us, right, in the streets, where they're actually coming. Believe it or not, I have people that come to me and say, Linda, I can't even believe some of the things that I used to say. So I think what we need to do is challenge our own people first. And when I talk about racism, by the way, right, we as Muslims are not immune to racism, right? We are a very diverse community, and we have classism, right? We have racism within the Muslim community. We have misogyny and patriarchy in the Muslim community, not any news to anyone else. So when I talk about this, I'm not saying it's an American concept. It is a concept in every single community. So sometimes I have to challenge things when people talk about interracial marriage in the Muslim community, where people will say, oh, I'm not racist, but I don't know if I want my Palestinian daughter marrying a black man. Like, that's real, right? So I want you to know that those issues exist. But what I also want you to know is that Muslim women in our communities are at the forefront of addressing those topics, issues of sexual abuse and sexual assault, domestic violence. We have some of the most extraordinary women, many of whom are right here from New York City, running organizations addressing domestic violence within Muslim communities head on, unapologetically. So what I want people to know is that these issues that I talk about are also within my own community. But I also, and what we don't know, because people will say, yeah, we know that, but what you don't know is that the people addressing them are Muslim women in the community. And it is all about accountability. It's all about moral courage. And there's a verse in the Quran that says that O you who believe, stand up against injustice, even if it's against, right? Get this, even if it's against your parents or yourself, right? So my religion tells me that even if my parents are wrong, I get to stand up to my parents. And they say that the strongest form of resistance, right, is strict or strong words, I'm translating from Arabic, against an oppressor or a tyrant. Like, that's the religion that I come from. So accountability, challenge the people, just got to keep having those conversations, and people will change. If we can't convince the closest to us, right, then our activism is meaningless on the outside, right? If I come from if I can't convince my mother who held me and loves me, right, that about an injustice, then I'm gonna have a hard time convincing some stranger that I don't know. So I started with my family, and they're still not perfect, let me tell you, but they're moving along, they're coming along.
Hi. I'm guessing, based on actually a bunch of the comments that you've made, that you're someone who really deeply believes in the power of the written word. And I'm interested in what sort of authors or books you turn to when you need a way to feel recentered in your life and in your work.
Oh, man. I mean, Audre Lorde, like, I don't know, the brilliance that is this woman. You know, one book that really, I'm sure many of you read in this room, and it's a book that I read, like, I'm not exaggerating, but I probably read this book like 9 times. I mean, the autobiography of Malcolm X, you know, the power of redemption, the power of transformation, the power of looking at someone who you would look down on in a society that had the opportunity to be a great leader. I think that teaches us that the potential of every single person in our community to be valuable assets to society. Oh man, Arunthai, help me out here. She does these quotes that I have all over my phone. Kaur is the last name. Rupi, that, another one, brilliant. Like, I don't know where those, there was one in particular that, believe it or not, because my mom's on Facebook now, my mom picked it up, and it's such a moving, and it was like right around the time when we were still debating whether, well, we're still debating it, but whether or not we wanted refugees, and it was something that was like, we came to a land that told us that you're not welcomed here, and it really spoke to my mom as an immigrant that came here. So reading also, believe it or not, like just reading some of the women in the movement, you know, reading their op-eds, you know, and they are doing a lot of writing, which is so beautiful at this stage, and it's so easily accessible to us. And being able to just read their brilliance also just gives me inspiration and gives me hope. And sometimes, because I don't have a lot of time to always read stuff, just watching powerful documentaries. And the recent one that I watched, so by the way, not only do I need things to like inspire me, I need things to like re-outrage me. You know, like when you're like, when like your outrage is starting to go down, and you're like, nuts, man, I gotta get mad again. Somebody give me something. And if you want to be outraged, like really outraged, like you want to like scream at the top of your lungs and like punch walls, you got to watch 13th. It's a documentary right now on Netflix, and it is absolutely, you know, it's brilliant, but it's absolutely outrageous. Like to the point where you will really feel a sense of deep shame as an American to live in a country that is engaging in really what it is modern day slavery. Like that's exactly what's happening on our watch. So I highly encourage you to watch 13th.
Hello, I'm on this side now. So I'm fourth generation Japanese American, and so all my great grandparents and my grandparents were interned in internment camps during World War II, and we were the terrorists of the time. And you know, that kind of like ignited my grandpa, and he became a Christian minister and used his platform and his pedestal in the church to organize communities in San Francisco and the Bay Area. But more likely than not, the experience is more like the other side of my family, my grandmother, who really decided to assimilate. You know, there was a major pressure, forced assimilation, to lose the language, to not celebrate the holidays anymore. You know, we held on to some traditions, mostly food, but beyond that, you know, there was a lot of internalized shame that was then passed down to my parents and then passed down to me. And what you said about the young man who asked, you know, where were people at that moment during internment camps, I asked myself that, but I mostly asked myself, where were my people? Why did my people go? And it was really, you know, without a lot of protest. Anyways, I won't go into that. So, but there was a lot of shame, a lot of fear. And I'm wondering if you have thoughts about organizing in this time of intense fear, and particularly to allies, like how do we organize our people? And I think you spoke to this already a little bit in the question before, but how do you organize in this time of really intense fear and so much misunderstanding about what Muslim culture and religion is? I was lucky enough to grow up around a lot of Muslim people, and so I have a different understanding, but so many people that I'm hearing are like going on to subway trains and then, you know, seeing someone in a hijab and being afraid of them. You know, little things like that.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And I mean, I also get deep inspiration from the Japanese American community. I've gotten to spend a lot of time with Congressman Mike Honda, who was a child and was actually in an internment camp, and he's a member of Congress out in California. I think that assimilation is a really dangerous thing, and that's why, you know, when I think about it, I think about integration. I think about being who I am and staying who I am, right, in this country, because this country was made of people like us and like me and you. But there's this been push of assimilation, and assimilation, really what it means is how white can you get and how white can you be. That's really what it is. And I'm going to give you a great example. You know, Arab Americans are considered white by the U.S. Census. And in the 1940s, we were actually approached as a community whether or not we wanted minority status. And there were Arab Americans that chose not to be minorities, right? Because they understood that in order to be privileged in this country, they had already picked up that being white is the way to go. So we lost out on a lot of opportunities as a community because there were people in the 1940s, many of whom were Arab Christians, you know, Syrian, Lebanese Christians, who chose not to be a minority. And I think that there are many, you know, communities, right? Like if I wasn't wearing this hijab, I could be another white girl. Like I do have pretty light skin, I have dark hair. I could probably, people thought I was Puerto Rican when I wasn't wearing hijab. I had like that Rosie Perez thing going on from Brooklyn. But generally speaking, I could, if I wanted to, I could. It's very easy for many Arabs in particular who are from the Levant, right, to assimilate, because in my neighborhood in Bay Ridge, many of whom are Christian, Lebanese, and Syrians, and they wear crosses, and they're blonde, and they have blue eyes. So that was cool. But I think that there's a new generation, in particular of Asian Americans, right, and I think they're your generation, a little bit older, right, who are basically saying no. No more model minority. That's not who we are anymore. There are Asian Americans that are with us on the front lines of the fight for Black lives, for immigrant rights, and they're saying not anymore. They understood the mistakes, and mind you, they're mistakes, but they're not mistakes to be angry at. People made those decisions for safety and for security and for what they projected to be good futures for their children. So they were doing it from a good place. It was well-intentioned. It wasn't that they were like, we don't care about Japan or our Japanese heritage, but we want to be safe in this country, and this is the way to do it. And many people did that before. The Irish were able to then go from a marginalized communities to checking the white box. The same thing with the Italians. Now, one of the things that makes me hopeful is that there's this new generation of fearlessness in this country that is really inspiring to me. And while they say millennials, I'm still a millennial. I was born in 1980, people. Barely made it. where I feel like we're getting to the point where we're like, we just don't care. We have no loyalty to any political parties, and we're out here to say no. And I'll give you an example. So 2010, the US Census Bureau was engaging in the census, and they were supporting small ethnic organizations around the country to make sure that you got your people to fill out the census forms and how important it was. So they came to my organization in Brooklyn, and they were like, Linda, we need you to help your people and do the census form. I was like, nope. I was like, my people don't want to do the census form. They were like, what do you mean? Of course, I understood there was a larger vision, counting the people brings in more resources for healthcare and things like that. Like, I did understand that, but I just wanted to mess with them a little bit. I was like, no. I was like, my people don't want to fill out the census. And they were like, what do you mean? I said, because we're not white. And then you say in the census form, people are saying they don't feel reflected because if it says white, and then under it, there's like a parentheses, and it says if you're like Middle Eastern or North African, you're supposed to check the white box. So then there's a spot that says other box that you get to write in something. So then I said, okay, let's talk about this. What if I do it my way? And they didn't really know what my way was. So they were like, look, we don't care what way you do it. The point is we want it done, right? So they were providing resources to organization. So what did we do in 2010? We started a national campaign, and the national campaign was called Check It Right, You Ain't White. And we had a great flyer, people. It was just wonderful. And the idea was we connected to Arab American organizations around the country, and we basically shared messaging and shared flyers and shared talking points with the idea that you filled out the census form, that you checked the other box, right? And that in the other line, you put whatever you wanted. If you wanted to put Yemeni, if you wanted to put Arab, if you wanted to put Palestinian, whatever you wanted, you got to put there. And in particular, what bothers me about the white box is if you're North Africa, so for example, if you're from Egypt, if you're from southern Egypt, you are black as an African. So the fact that you, because of your country of origin, have to put that you're white is just outrageous to me. There was a big case about that, by the way, in the state of Michigan. But anyway, so we did that. So what happens afterwards, anybody who puts other gets put back in the white box anyway. But it requires just a lot more work on the Census Bureau's part. Now, there must have been a lot of work, because the Census Bureau then started testing a new category, called MENA, Middle East, North Africa. So they started testing it in 2015. We started testing real well. And in the 2020 census, there will be a category that says MENA. So I can now check off a box that is reflective of my ancestry, and I don't have to be put in the white box, just for the simple fact that some guy decided that an Arab or person who's Arab has to be white. So the reason why I say that to you is that it required young people to stand up and say, no, I am not going to be who you want me to be or who you determine that I be. I will be who I want to be, and for now I'm going to be other until you find me another box that is going to be reflective of who I am. And I think that there's a generation who's starting to say, I will tell you who I am, right? I will tell you what gender to call me or what sexual orientation to call me. I will tell you what my parents' roots are and where they came from, the way I want to tell you. I'll tell you what languages I want to speak and when I want to speak them. And it's so manifested in the public discourse that it's actually quite remarkable, right? And in particular amongst Asian, I don't know if you remember the Google Doc, right? Somebody started a Dear Asian Parents to try to get more, to basically explain to their parents why the Black Lives Matter movement was so important to these young people. This is remarkable. How do you do that? You start a Google Doc, and a whole bunch of Asians all around the country are joining in on one Google Doc to create a letter that they can all share with their family members. This is what your generation is all about. So I always tell people sometimes we are ashamed of things and decisions that our great-grandparents or grandparents made, but I understand why my parents sometimes made the decisions that they wanted, because they wanted my safety, right? Sometimes I tell my parents, why in the hell did you come to the United States? I wanted to live in Palestine. My parents were like, really? And my parents made a decision to leave their families in an occupied territory where I still have family members who live there, because my father wanted a better life for me here, right? And he came here to the United States. There's a lot of things that my parents came with that I sometimes question, but I always say, well, they're my parents. There must have been a good reason why they did that. And all we can do is move forward from there, and I think we can try to bring our people along. But the other thing I always tell people is we sometimes get caught up in trying to bring some of those folks with us, like our elders. And I'm not saying all elders, but there are some in our community that just want to be where they're at. And I say, we try, and if they don't want to come, it's cool. We just go without them. And I think that that is what's happening now. And guess what's happening? We started going without them, and then they started joining us, right? And I'll just say this really quickly, and I was telling folks earlier that it's the same thing also with philanthropy, right? Because you hear a lot of people in the right wing say things like, oh, George Soros got them all funded, right? And like all this like big, like hyper, like they would, even if they understood what kind of resources are in the movement, there are barely any resources in the movement, people. Ask CCR, they'll tell you all about it. You know, even philanthropy, you know, we've been in the spaces with philanthropy where we've told philanthropy, look, there's a new way of thinking about this. It's something called risk-taking, which are a lot of young people, as you see, are doing right now in the streets of their communities, right, on all levels, right? And we're telling philanthropy, there's a train, it's called the social justice train. You either get on it, right, or it's still gonna move without you. And what's gonna happen is that social justice train is gonna get to liberation, and you're gonna wish that you were on that train. So that's where we're at right now as a country. There is a train, right, and it's moving. You gotta make that decision, right, whether you wanna be on it or not. And whether or not you decide to be on it, it's moving. And I really believe in the potential of this generation to bring us into great progress. And I want you to be able to say that you were with us, that you were on that train with us, and that we are going to win together. And I promise you this time, it's gonna be a lesser period of time. Like I feel winning is very close. Like I feel it. Like you know how people say plant the seeds, but you may not be able to see the fruits of your labor? We live in a time where we can actually potentially see the fruits of our labor in just the way that the world works and how fast the world is moving around us. So that's where I'm at. We're gonna win, people, we have to.
It's an extraordinarily difficult time, and we couldn't have picked a better person to guide us. Thank you.